Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in matters and relationships of Torah. This week we are in Parshat Lecha, which you can find in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 1 is where we're going to start. We will read through our English translation of our portion. Then I'll share with you a little bit of focus study of an aspect of the Torah portion, and then we'll open it up for everyone to have an opportunity to share his or her thoughts, reflections, responses to this week's Torah portion. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute, together we can recite our blessing for this opportunity of being together. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam
asher kishanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for this opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. We begin with chapter 12, verse 1, the book of Genesis. Adonai said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you." Daniel, would you like to read a little bit? Verse 4.
4. So Abram went forth as the Eternal had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran.
And you can read 5 and 6.
Abram took his wife Sarai, his brother's son Lot, all the possessions they had amassed, and the people they had acquired in Haran. They set forth for the land of Canaan, and they arrived in the land of Canaan. Abram then traveled the land as far as the sacred site of Shechram, as far as the oak of Morah. At that time, the Canaanites were present in the land.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And Richard, would you like to read starting in verse 7?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "I will give this land to your offspring." And he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to the Lord and invoked the Lord by name. Then Abram journeyed by stages toward Negev.
Thank you. And Sherry, would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 10?
Thank you. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. If the Egyptians see you and think she is his wife, they will kill me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may remain alive thanks to you."
And Steve?
When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw how very beautiful the woman was. Pharaoh's courtiers saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's palace, and because of her, it went well with Abram. He acquired sheep, oxen, asses, male and female slaves, she-asses, and camels.
Thank you. And then June, would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 17?
Thank you, Rabbi. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Now therefore behold thy wife, take her and go thy way." And Pharaoh gave men charge concerning him, and they brought him on the way, and his wife and all that he had.
Thank you, Jude. And then we ask, Dave, would you like to read starting at the beginning of chapter 13?
From Egypt, Abram went up into the Negev with his wife and all that he possessed, together with Lot. Now Abram was very rich in cattle, silver, and gold. And he proceeded by stages from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been formerly, between Bethel and Ai, the site of the altar that he had built there at first. And there Abram invoked the Lord by name.
Thank you, Dave. Would you like to read a little bit?
I'm not to my page.
Okay, so let me now invite Cheryl. Would you like to unmute and read a little bit starting at verse 5 of chapter 13?
Thank you, Rabbi. Now Lot, who had gone with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support them both. They had so much property that they could not remain together. A quarrel now broke out between Abram's cattle herders and Lot's cattle herders. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were inhabiting the land. Then Abraham said to Lot, there should be no quarrel between you and me and your herdsmen and mine, for we are close kin. The whole land lies before you. Pray, part from me. If you go north, I will turn south. And if you go south, I will turn north.
Okay, and let me invite Margot. Would you like to read beginning at verse 10?
Sure, because I'm eager to get on with the story. Lot looked about him and saw how well watered was the whole plain of the Jordan, all of it. This was before the Lord had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, all the way to Zoar, like the garden of the Lord, like the lands of Egypt. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they parted from each other. Abraham remained in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the plain, pitching his tents near them. Now the inhabitants of Sodom were very wicked sinners against the Lord.
Thank you so much, Margot. And let me, Paul, would you like to read beginning at verse 14?
Thank you, Rabbi. Hashem said to Abraham, after Lot had parted from him, raise now your eyes and look out from where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land that you see, to you will I give it, and to your descendants forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, then your offspring too can be counted. Arise, walk about the land through its length and breadth, for to you will I give it. And Abraham moved his tent and came and dwelled in the plains of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built there an altar to Hashem.
Thank you so much. Jay, would you like to read a little bit beginning at the start of chapter 14?
Thank you, Rabbi. 14. Now, when King Amraphel of Shinar, King Arioch of Elasar, King Chedorlaomer of Elam, and King Tidal of Goyim made war on King Bera of Sodom, King Bersha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Admah, King Shemeber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All the latter joined forces at the valley of Siddim, now the Dead Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim at Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zunim at Ham, the Emim at Shaveh Kriathaim, and the Horites in their hill country of Ser, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. On their way back, they came to En Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and subdued all the territories of the Malachites. and also the Amorites who dwelt in the Hazazon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar, went forth and engaged them in battle in the valley of Siddim. King Shedor Lamor of Elam, King Tidal of Goyim, King Armaphel of Shinar, and King Arioch of Elasar, 4 kings against those 5.
Thank you so much. Justin, would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 10?
Thank you, Rabbi. Now, the valley of Siddim was composed of many clay pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and they fell there, and the survivors fled to a mountain. And they took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food, and they departed. And they took Lot and his possessions, the son of Abram's brother, and they departed. And he was living in Sodom. And the fugitive came, and he told Abram, the Hebrew, and he was living in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Aner, who were Abram's confederates. And Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, and he armed his trained men, those born in his house, 318, and he pursued them until Dan. And he divided himself against them at night, he and his servants, and smote them and pursued them until Hobah, which is to the left of Damascus. And he restored all the possessions, and also Lot his brother and his possessions he restored, and also the women and the people. And the king of Sodom came out and toward him after his return from smiting Chedor Lamor, and the kings who were with him, to the valley of Shaveh, which is the valley of the king. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was a priest to the Most High God. And he blessed him, and he said, Blessed be Abram to the Most High God, who possesses heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, who has delivered your adversaries into your hand. And he gave him a tithe from all.
Thank you. So, go ahead. Why don't you finish up chapter 14? Thank you, Justin.
And the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the souls, and the possessions take for yourself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I raise my hand to the Lord, the Most High God, who possesses heaven and earth. Neither from a thread to a shoe strap, nor will I take from whatever is yours, that you should not say, I have made Abram wealthy. Exclusive of what the lads ate and the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, they shall take their share.
Thank you so much. Chapter 15. Sometime later, the word of Adonai came to Avram in a vision. God said, Fear not, Avram, I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great. But Avram said, O Adonai God, what can you give me, seeing that I shall die childless, and the one in charge of my household is Damasek, Eliezer. Avram said further, Since you have granted me no offspring, my steward will be my heir. The word of Adonai came to him in reply, That one shall not be your heir. None but your very own issue shall be your heir. God took him outside and said, Look toward heaven and count the stars if you are able to count them. And God added, So shall your offspring be. And because he put his trust in Adonai, God reckoned it to his merit. Daniel, would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 7?
Yes, saying to him, I am the Eternal who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land as an inheritance. And he then said, Eternal God, how can I know that I shall take possession of it? And God answered, bring me a 3-year-old calf, a 3-year-old kid, a 3-year-old ram, and a young turtle dove. So he took all these and split them, all but the bird in the middle, placing each half opposite the other. Vultures descended upon the carcasses, but Abraham seized them away. Then as the sun was setting, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and lo, a powerful dark dread was falling upon him.
Would you like to read 13 and 14 as well?
Me?
Yes.
God said to Abraham, know now that your descendants shall be strangers in a land not theirs. They shall be enslaved and afflicted for 400 years. But then I will bring judgment upon the nation they are serving. After that, they shall go out with many possessions. And you shall go to your ancestors in peace. You shall be buried in good old age. The 4th generation shall return there, for not until then shall the iniquity of the Amorites be paid.
Thank you so much. And Richard,
You're
would you like to read starting at 17?
When the sun set and it was very dark, there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch which passed between those pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites.
Why don't you keep reading too?
Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, see, the Lord has kept me from bearing. Consort with my maid. Perhaps I shall have a son through her. And Abram heeded Sarai's request. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took her maid Hagar the Egyptian, after Abraham had dwelt in the land of Canaan 10 years, and gave her to her husband Abram as a concubine. And he cohabitated with Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem. And Sarai said to Abram, the wrong done me is your fault. I myself gave my maid into your bosom. Now that she sees that she is pregnant, I am lowered in her esteem. The Lord decide between you and me. Abram said to Sarai, your maid is in your hands. Deal with her as you think right. Then Sarai treated her harshly, and she ran away from her.
Thank you. Jerry, would you like to read starting there at verse 7?
An angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the road to Shur, and said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am running away from my mistress Sarah. And the angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment. And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly increase your offspring, and they shall be too many to count. The angel of the Lord said to her further, behold, you are with child and shall bear a son, and you shall call him Ishmael. For the Lord has paid heed to your suffering. He shall be a wild ass of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. He shall dwell alongside all of his kinsmen. And she said to the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roy, by which she meant, have I not gone on seeing after he saw me? Therefore the well was called, Chris, help me with this, Bear.
Hi, Roy.
Thank you. It is between Kadesh and Bered, is that correct?
Yeah.
Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram gave the son that Hagar bore to him the name of Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram.
Thank you. And Steve, at the start of chapter 17?
When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk in my ways and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous. Abram threw himself on his face, and God spoke to him further. As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the father of a multitude of nations, and you shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I make you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile and make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you. I will maintain my covenant between me and you and your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant throughout the ages, to be God to you and to your offspring to come. I assign the land you sojourn in to you and your offspring to come, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting holding. I will be their God.
Thank you so much. Hannah, would you like to read at verse 9?
God then said to Abraham, as for you, observe my covenant, you and your descendants after you in all your generations. This is my covenant that you and your descendants after you are to observe. Let every male among you be circumcised. When the flesh of your foreskin has been circumcised, it shall become a sign of the covenant between us. And in all your generations, let every 8-day-old boy among you be circumcised, whether it be a homeborn slave or bought from foreigners, not of your own descent. Let your homeborn slave and the one you buy be circumcised, so that my covenant may be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. An uncircumscribed male who has not circumcised the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant.
Thank you so much. Dave, would you like to read there beginning at verse 15?
And God said to Abraham, as for your wife Sarai, you shall not call her Sarai, but her name shall be Sarah. I will bless her indeed. I will give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will give rise to nations. Rulers of people shall issue from her. Abraham threw himself on his face and laughed as he said to himself, can a child be born to a man 100 years old? Or can Sarah bear a child at 90? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live by your favor. God said, nevertheless, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. And I will maintain my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring to come. As for Ishmael, I have heeded you. I hereby bless him and will make him fertile and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 chieftains, and I will make of him a great nation. But my covenant I will maintain with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year. And when he was done speaking with him, God was gone from Abraham.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Cheryl to start there at verse 23. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Rabbi. Abraham then took Ishmael his son and all his homeborn slaves and those who had been bought, every male among Abraham's slaves, and on that very day Abraham circumcised the flesh of their foreskins as God had instructed him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very day both Abraham and Ishmael his son were circumcised. And all the people of his household, the homeborn slaves and those bought from foreigners, were circumcised with him.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. I'd like to share with you a little bit of focus study, and then we'll open it up for our general discussion. if you have a copy of the study sheet that I circulated, I'd like to start off just by looking at the photograph of the sculpture at the very top of the page. This is a sculpture by a Los Angeles artist named Sterling Ruby. And it's quite a large piece of sculpture. It's about 6 feet high. It's about 13.5 feet long. And one of the aspects of Sterling Ruby's works is his interest in bringing together different kinds of materials. So, for example, this particular sculpture consists of urethane blocks, a dye, wood, spray paint, and laminate. And he's very intentional in wanting to bring together these very different materials. And the way he talks about it, he says that for him, it represents a scattered, what he calls a scattered routine that belongs within a coherent trajectory. So there's something that motivates him, that moves him about bringing different materials together in some kind of coherency. So much of his work, as I've read about it, combines a notion of friction, and he seeks to play up themes of both social and art historical friction that generates feelings of anxiety and agitation by contrasting, in this particular case, some forms that seem to be quite clean and lean, and then some other aspects of the materials that are quite coarse. So for him, what he's doing in particular is he's seeking to engender a critique of, in the art world, we call the minimalism, which has to do with rather clean lines and rectilineal shapes and so forth. So he takes those shapes that one would associate with minimalism and then seeks to kind of undermine them and subvert them by defacing them, by writing on them, by carving into them, and thereby kind of disrupting what should be in minimalism rather clean, straightforward, and smooth surfaces and lines. So for him, this is a way to critique a kind of authoritarian and exclusionary ideological underpinning of a particular art movement. So for him, what he's trying to do with his work, I think, is to create a sense of tension, a friction, which for him is generative. Okay, it produces something new. So we're going to play a little bit with these notions of tension that our artist brings to his work and look at how that operates within our text. When we discussed the very opening up of Torah, Parshat Bereshit, we discussed how we might expect the beginning of a great work, which is going to lay out the origins of the whole universe, the origins of a people, a foundational story, that we might expect that it would provide clarity and location and clear purpose and direction. And instead, what we discover from the very opening letter is instead it destabilizes us. It takes out from under our feet that sense of certainty by having a grammatical oddity as the very first word. And then we pursued kind of a little bit more that very opening sentence and discovered how it was full of mystery rather than clarity, ambiguity rather than clarity. So what I want to suggest is this Torah portion is in many ways a new beginning. This is the beginning of what will become known as the Jewish people with Abraham. And I also want to suggest that this beginning as well has a sense of not clarity, but mystery, some ambiguity, some indeterminacy. So let's explore how that works. So number one, we have our opening verse, that I will show you. Go leave behind what's familiar to you and go to the place that I will show you. And what we note when we read that carefully is God doesn't initially say, you're going to go to the land of Canaan. God just says, leave everything behind and you're going to go to some place that eventually I will show you. So the great commentator Rashi combines that opening with several others, that verses that we find in our Bible, and notes similar kind of indeterminacy of direction that God is giving various characters. So in addition to our verse that I will show you, Rashi goes on to say, God did not reveal the land to him immediately in order to make it dear in his eyes and to give him reward for each and every word, for every step. Similarly, in Genesis 22, verse 2, we have your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac. And similarly, on one of the mountains that I will say to you. And similarly from book of Jonah, and proclaim it upon it the proclamation that I will speak to you. So here Rashi is taking these several verses, both from the book of Genesis and this last one from the book of Jonah, in which God is giving direction without giving specificity about either where one is supposed to go, what mountain Abraham is supposed to go to, which of his sons he's supposed to bring up to the mountain, and in the case of Jonah, exactly what Jonah is supposed to say once he gets to Nineveh. So what is this? What is happening here? What's the significance of these God giving these instructions that are not clear? They're not specific. They're indeterminate initially. We have our great contemporary commentator Aviva Zornberg, who writes in her book, The Beginning of Desire, where there is total revelation, there is no room for language. Where meaning is uncertain, communications proliferate. What Aviva Zornberg seems to be indicating is how important desire and curiosity is in any kind of meaningful relationship. If all you provide to another person is complete knowledge of who you are, then what's left in terms of trying to explore and learn more, and that exploration and learning more about the other person she's hinting at is so essential to having a rich, meaningful, mutual relationship, this notion of desire and curiosity. Abraham Joshua Heschel, in his book, Man is Not Alone, puts it this way in number 3. Religion, the end of isolation, begins with a consciousness that something is asked of us. Wonder is not a state of aesthetic enjoyment. Endless wonder unlocks an innate sense of indebtedness. This is very much in keeping with how Jewish tradition understands what opens up Abraham to hearing the word of God, which is Abraham didn't say, according to Midrash, didn't say, oh, how beautiful is the world. Abraham said, the world seems to be in trouble and needs some attention. This is how the Midrash reads this notion about why does Abraham get to hear the voice of God? Because Abraham experiences that the world's in trouble and needs attention. And that opens up this sense of the voice of the universe speaking to Abraham and saying, we're now in relationship because you're exploring, you're wondering why the world is the way it is and couldn't it be better? And you're the person who's going to help make it better. So this notion about wonder and mystery and indeterminacy, rather than full disclosure, full clarity, full specificity, full revelation. This is what gets beginnings going, okay? And so it's interesting, we will see this in one of our next readings. Our Torah portion opens up with these words, Lech Lecha. What's interesting is that when we get to the binding of Isaac, the same words will be used there as well, Lech Lecha. So in this week's Torah portion, we have Lech Lecha, from your land. And then when we read about the binding of Isaac, those words will come up again. Lech Lecha, to the land of Moriah, and offer him as a burnt offering. What we read about in this week is the first, if you will, testing of Abraham. Lech Lecha, are you going to be responsive to that? Is that going to provoke you to do some wondering and questioning? And the last trial, the last testing, if you will, of Abraham, of the binding of Isaac, has the same terms, Lech Lecha. So these two testings of Abraham are defined by a sense of indeterminacy, an invitation into mystery, if you will. And Abraham responds positively to this invitation to go into mystery, to seek something further. And we'll explore that with the binding of Isaac when we get to that Torah portion. Our Torah portion is called Lech Lecha. What's interesting to note is that the vocalization of the second of those words, which is pronounced Lecha, it doesn't appear that way in Torah, a scroll. We just have the two Hebrew letters, Lamed and Kaf, which get repeated. Lamed Kaf, Lamed Kaf. It is a matter of vocalized tradition that the second one of them gets pronounced Lecha. But really, in the Torah scroll itself, it's just the exact same two letters, Lamed Kaf, Lamed Kaf. So I want to suggest this. You could read it as Lech, Lech, which in that case would mean go, go. In which case, what we could say is there are actually two different instructions of movement, two different instructions to go, two different journeys that are being described here. So the first one we have in our opening verse of chapter 12, verse 1, go forth from the land that you're familiar with. So that particular go has to do with going on a journey into a mystery. It's a journey that is unsettling because we don't know where we're going. We're leaving something behind. And the second one comes up, the second journey is just a few verses later where it says, and he, meaning Abraham, built an altar there, and from there he moved on to the hill country. And what Abraham begins engaging on at that point is going on a very different journey. He's going on a journey that is really about taking a survey, of marking out territory, of laying claim to a piece of land for future generations. So in that case, it's a settling journey. The first one is an unsettling journey. The second one is a settling journey. And each one of those journeys requires different kinds of qualities. The first one requires a sense of curiosity, a willingness to admit to truths and possibilities that one doesn't currently have or is currently aware of. And the second one, the settling journey, that requires a degree of courage to succeed, a willingness to commit to success and the discipline to do so. So two different kinds of journeys requiring two different kinds of traits. And Abraham seems to be able to display both of those. The question is, to what extent are we able to display those different qualities in our lives, both to embrace a journey and to embrace the willingness to lay claim and to succeed at a task in our life. If you turn over the sheet, I'd like to share with you two poems that really take us back home, so to speak. The first is from T.S. Eliot from his 4 quartets. He writes, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." When I read that, I thought of another poem. It's actually a song. It's a song that was written by 2 Jewish musicians and composers, Yip Harburg, who was born Isidor Hachberg, and Harold Arlen, who was born Hyman Arluck. And they wrote something that I know will be quite familiar to you. "Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true." If you remember the very end of The Wizard of Oz, there is Dorothy. She's back in her home, in her bed. She's surrounded by characters that when she wakes up, she knew them from before, but she had also encountered them in this land of Oz, which was either something she actually went to or perhaps was a dream. And she says, "Well, you were there. You were the Scarecrow. You were the lion. You were the Tin Man, and you were there too. You were there as Oz." And the message, of course, is that what you've been looking for has always been with you. The home that you've been seeking, the better place, was where you actually started out from. And each of those 3 main characters, the Tin Man, the Lion, and the Scarecrow, who were each seeking some part that they felt was missing from themselves, what they discovered in the journey was they had those, the brain and the heart and the courage, they had those already. They just had to go on a journey to discover them. This is all of this, T.S. Eliot, our friends Yip Harburg and Harold Arlen, they're all reciting something that is part of Jewish tradition. Midrash teaches us that right before we're born, the being has complete knowledge of everything. And as soon as that being is born into the world, everything, all that is forgotten. And that's why, according to Midrash, we have this little indentation here, because as we emerge from the womb, an angel kisses us right here, causing us to forget everything. And so the notion is that we spend our lives trying to recover what we already knew. Or Kabbalah puts it this way, that we forget ourselves into existence. And our journey is to remember what we already know. It's a very empowering message, because the message is that there's nothing that you lack, there's nothing that you don't know. And what life is all about is to discover your power and your knowledge within you. It's a very powerful message that Jewish tradition imparts to us, that we're not lacking, we're not deficient, it's not someone else who knows and can impart wisdom to us. It's not the Wizard of Oz, who's all powerful and can grant to us something that we don't have. We have it. It's how we live our lives that will enable us to recover that, to bring that forward out into the world. And so this notion of this exploration that Abraham is going on, which, as our text will teach us, it's an ongoing journey. It never really ends, but where the journey is designed to take us is back home. Because we carry all the wisdom we need within us. And just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, once we gain that, where do we wind up? Not in some foreign land, but we wind up back home. So with that, I'd love to open it up and have everyone share your thoughts and reflections about this week's
Oh,
Torah
that was
portion.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay. Anyone around? Anna, go ahead.
This is so much less than what you just said. I don't want to distract off your message, but I can look at it again.
Sure.
The picture that you chose, this long yellow rectangle with the two white looking perhaps rectangles on top, one streaked with red and one with green. How could you pick something so perfect for an altar, right? You know, we have the duplicity, the Lecha, we have, you know, from your land and to the land of Moriah. And the green, to me, always, it just speaks to me of plant life, right? And red, the red looks to me like, I think, either blood or fruit. Red fruit or blood, or fruit of the womb, which comes out bloody, which then grows to become something like the green. And I was thinking about that all the time you were teaching us and talking, and we were reading. And the gold box on the bottom, like the light of revelation of God's presence, or the golden glow in your heart when you're that have that feeling of being one with the universe. And then Cain and Abel bringing their offerings, one bringing an offering of animals to be slaughtered and one bringing plants. But both of these blocks up there are they're heading off of their base. They are going forward. They are Lech and Lech, or Lecha and Lecha. They are out there traveling.
Wow,
You just see what you did, and you didn't even know it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Anyone else around the table here? Daniel, yeah?
Yeah, so since you wanted to hear about my my forest baby, and I'll bring that into my talk, because Rabbi talked about how about this really being like a journey into mystery and uncertainty and other stuff.
Forest bathing, right?
No, bathing. Oh, not baiting.
Yeah.
B-A-T-H.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So because you wanted to know about my forest bathing class.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, where Rabbi was talking about going into the uncertainty and all of that and the mystery, I know my forest therapy professor is very big on the idea of getting out of your head, and the tradition is getting out of your head and getting out of the rational. So essentially what this was about is getting out of the rational and maybe even into a more sacred, and that may be all the stuff in the mother's womb. I guess a lot of the journey is just finding the sacred in nature.
That's very
Yeah.
nice. Thank you, Dan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard?
Yes, you know, sometimes I'm told the angel of forgetfulness forgets.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I look at this portion and I think, well, why did God pick Abram? Was it random? Could any of us have been there? And then I thought, well, what led Abram to actually listen for this voice? He's at the crossroads there where his father has died. He's no longer got a father, and all these people are following him. And if I was in those shoes, I would certainly impute a God in heaven, because I would be terribly afraid of being alone and making decisions. So when he starts out, Lech Lecha, and it's not told where he's going, because there's nowhere to go. This is about Abraham is giving us, this story is giving us a picture of a man engaged with God. God and he are one at this point. He's his friend right here. You don't need to tell me where we're going. We're just gonna move forward or go in a circle or whatever, but it's about getting closer to your source is what this journey is about. There's a story about we're gonna go here, we're gonna go there, we're gonna go there, go all these places, but this is about letting go of going and being. I just think that this is suddenly God speaks to him, and then when we get to the next chapter, the next paragraph, God appears. Doesn't say what that means. It doesn't. doesn't give a picture of God, but there's more, as a parent, he's within. And I think that is I see that as a foundational aspect of Judaism. What you talk about, Rabbi, so clearly is that we all have it in here. It's in here. And what do you do with yourself and your body and your breathing to, oh, this moment, yes, I'm part of that. And that's always with me. How do we get to that feeling? How do we get to be Hineni here? Always, always. And if you slow down, as Abraham did, is okay, I'm going to need some help here. And it will come because God is always there. I think that's what this story is about.
Nice. Thank you. Let me see if anyone knows. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I got two different messages that I got out of it. One is that the first one is the business of being, if you want somebody to do something, you really don't want to tell them anything. And the life experience I had when I was a young guy, I was bidding against Stanford Research Institute. And this particular project, I really knew everything, knew the equations. Oh, I put out a 30-page report. And I thought I was going to be a sure winner. And then I found out Stanford Research won. And so I asked the gentleman who was the decision maker, and he thought I really did a great job in explaining exactly what should be done. On the other hand, the other person left over, they just said that they would spend the money and be on schedule, and they would be at the assigned one sentence, they'll be at the test site. Three different, not even a comma. So I got taught a lesson that if you really, the way he explained it to me, it says, you explained what you wanted to do, but it was clear that we didn't want to do that. With the other person, they had a chance. So that's the way they explained it. And now I see that how God handled it, and that he told them, okay, we'll take you somewhere. Okay, and that's the way to go. Okay, the other point was just the opposite, that the idea of not being specific means there's a lot of will. You have a choice in many things. But then at the very beginning, and when I don't know who was reading at the point, all of a sudden came out that God lets out there's going to be 400 years of slavery of some kind. And he lets that out. And that's fairly specific. And so I don't know how you explain it. After all the stuff you talked about, he's telling these people something, no matter what you do, you're in trouble right now, And so it just seemed like it was just the opposite of what the message was.
Well, with any of these journeys, there's going to be a period of estrangement. That's what any good journey it requires, some degree of estrangement, rather than a constant feeling of certainty and of being in place, if you will, I think. So others who haven't had a chance yet, do you want to, yes, go ahead, June, go ahead and unmute and share with us.
I'm a little ignorant, I have to admit. My understanding was that the whole object of circumcision didn't come about till later. So I was kind of surprised that it was mentioned before the whole incident with Isaac and the sacrifice. Can you, because the story has always been told that that was the way that the Jewish people came to be through this act. And so I was surprised that the circumcision, was that a common practice beforehand?
Well, what's interesting is to think about it in the context in which it's described here, which is there is also, there was this historical notion that the way two sovereign powers would engage in would consummate a treaty between them is that they would have this ritual, which is actually described here, which is that an animal would be sacrificed, would be cut in half, and then the two sovereigns would walk between these pieces, and that would consummate a treaty that they had engaged in, a pact that they had agreed upon. And so Abraham has a dream in which there is this animal sacrifice, and it's cut in half, and so that seems to characterize as well. And so maybe this notion about the circumcision, this cutting away of some kind of flesh, represents that a consummation of a pact that's made between two sovereign powers, if you will. But yes, this is the first time that we get it. So, did you have some, Anna? Do you want to share about?
It's kind of a circumcision comment. You know, I see, you know, round, when I see I see a ring of skin, I see something circular. And I noticed this in this reading of the portion, Abraham says to Lot, you know, you look out here at the whole world. If you take the north, I'll go south. If you want to go east, I'll go west. And it's polarities. It's going this way or that way. But the underlying, also there is the circumcision, which is round, which is the balancing of polarities. It's finding the center. It's becoming centered with God and being one with God. It's a little treasure hiding right there in front of us.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. And others wish to share something?
Can I just?
Yes, go ahead, Sherry.
So I'm looking at the sheet about Americans trusting themselves is the lowest. It's been in over a half a century. That caught my attention, that whole paragraph, that in the 1970s, it was 85%, then it's gone down. In the 2000s, it went to 78%, and today's plummeted to 55%. And I was thinking about that and juxtaposing it onto this week's lesson. And, you know, if you don't trust yourself to allow yourself to become unsettled, to require it to allow your curiosity to come forth, to admit to truths and possibilities, to lay claim, all of that requires a certain amount of trust in yourself before you can do any of that. And it's rather unsettling, the thought of that, and what all this means for us as a country. And if I can go a step further and compare it to something else, 60 Minutes did a segment, I think it was this last Sunday, on it's a type of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's where you can take you can fabricate another human being, and it's like misinformation is going in a direction to heights that we can't even imagine. I mean, it was just a very shocking expose of that. So what you have is an American public that is highly susceptible to misinformation, to really being duped, and this erosion of trust where everything seems to be, there's nothing settled. Everything seems to be in flux. So it's just an unsettling sense for me. And I'm going back to your comment here, acts, and I'm not really into this kind of art. I mean, you know more than I do. Like the absolute contempt for total serenity. I mean,
there we go.
We are really, this is where we're headed.
So I think what the artist there is trying to say is that is kind of to counter a message of any kind of hegemonic, authoritarian, exclusive way of looking at things, that the only way to really the only way to move is to have a level of friction. Okay. I think that's what he's trying to get at. And I'm glad you brought up the Gallup poll about the decreasing amount of confidence that American citizens have in themselves to govern themselves. Because what that leads to is, if I don't have confidence in myself or to be able to make good decisions, I'm going to surrender that power to someone else. And so that kind of decline of self-confidence politically can lead to a kind of dictatorship and authoritarian government.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So let me, if you will, take this home a little bit by picking up on something that Richard was kind of taking us to where Abraham begins his journey with the death of his father. And what's fascinating is that when we read the text carefully, we see that where his father, Terah, was headed was from the land of the Chaldeans to the land of Canaan. That was his goal. He just didn't get there. He stopped in Haran for some reason or other. He wasn't able to complete his journey. He wasn't able to fulfill his dream of being in the land of Canaan. We sometimes miss that what's happening is where Abraham ultimately is supposed to go is to the land of Canaan, which was where his father was headed. And so it takes me back to something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago with, I believe it was one of our teachers. I believe it was Rav Kook. No, it was the Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapira, who was talking about beginnings. And he said, every beginning is also a continuation. And we need to have both a sense of continuity and innovation. That's what Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapira would say. A true beginning combines both innovation and continuity. And that seems to be what's happening here in the story, which is where we think that Abraham is starting off on a whole new, brand new, innovative journey. But when we read the text carefully, we see that it's really a continuation of his father's journey. And so this is the dynamic that we're all caught up in, which is sometimes we're too much one way. We're just completely so traditional and so uninnovative that all we're doing is replicating what has been in the past. And sometimes we're way too much the other way. We're so innovative that we're so radical in our innovations that we break our sense of connection with the past. And what this material is teaching us is you need to have both. You need to have both a sense of innovation and continuation. And that's the kind of journey that this text is encouraging us to go on. And when we find that kind of journey, where are we? We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. I want to thank everyone for being on this journey together with us all. It makes the journey so much richer. I learned so much from all of us being together. It's wonderful to be companions with you all. God bless you all. Look forward to seeing you next time. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.